In the Companion's questline, Bethesda tells the story of two radically different groups of people. The Companions, who pride themselves as being the honorable defenders of Skyrim, and the Silverhand, a cult-like organization that kills werewolves for sport based on an unjustified hatred for the unnatural. This is particularly problematic for the Companions because several of their members have beast blood running through their veins. We learned early on in the Companion's questline that the Silverhand is more barbaric than we ever could have imagined, at times even capturing werewolves and performing gruesome experiments on them without remorse. It's also worth mentioning that while the Companions were partially responsible for escalating the conflict to extraordinary heights, the Silverhand made the first move. This is seen when we ventured to Dustman's Cairn with Farkas in search of a Wuthrat fragment, only to get ambushed by a small army of Silverhand warriors. Yes, both factions are to blame for the war, though I would argue one more than the other, but it's important to keep in mind that the Silverhand started the conflict, not the Companions.
Never should have come.
You won't leave here alive.
When Aella asked us to attack the Silverhand at Gallows Rock with her and Skjor, I was personally all for it. Just one quest before, we had discovered a journal on a Silverhand's body titled Physicalities of Werewolves, which talked about how this deeply rooted hatred for werewolves was based off of nothing at all, similar to how Adolf Hitler hated the Jews and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda hate the United States. Also in this journal was a detailed description of some of the horrific experiments the Silverhand conducts on captured werewolves. Experiments that almost always ended with the werewolves being killed. Notably, I found this journal on not one but multiple Silverhand throughout the questline, which tells me that this is a book widely read and shared amongst members of the cult. Because of the barbaric nature of the Silverhand and their sheer hatred for werewolves, I had no problem marching into Gallows Rock with Aella and slaughtering them all.
No more!
And good riddance. It didn't feel immoral to me because we were fighting against evil and saving countless lives in the process. When we learned that the Silverhand had killed Skjor inside of Gallows Rock, I became even more enraged and felt that I could morally accept any battle plan that Aella came up with, regardless of how many Silverhand died in the process. It can't be.
The bastards. Somehow they managed to kill Skjor. He was one of the strongest we had, but numbers can overwhelm. He should not have come without a shield brother. Get out of here. I'm going to make sure we got the last of them.
I know it sounds gruesome, but again, I saw this group as pure evil. I wanted them gone in the same way they wanted the werewolves gone. And I was willing to do just about anything to ensure that that happened. It wasn't until I spoke to Kodlak about the war on the Silverhand that I began questioning my actions. On a side note, Kodlak to me is the most respectable companion of them all. He's clearly grown wiser with age, and he sticks to his beliefs regardless of what others might think or say. Like Vilkas, Kodlak does not embrace his beast blood. He believes that turning away from his inner werewolf allows him to think more clearly and live an overall better life. Based on this, it's easy to see why there is some tension amongst members of the Companions. Some, like Aella and Skjor, view the beast blood as a blessing, while others, like Kodlak and Vilkas, see beast blood as a curse. Nevertheless, Kodlak remained resolute in his beliefs, and that was more than enough for him to earn my respect. Upon telling Kodlak that we had been waging a war against the Silverhand with Aella, Kodlak was not pleased. He stated quite clearly that the war will lead to a cycle of retaliation. In the end, he was right, but at the time I had mixed feelings on Kodlak's perspective. On the one hand, I knew that the war likely would escalate and lead to some unintended consequences. But on the other hand, I thought that Kodlak was being a bit naive. It seemed as though he believed that if the companions stopped fighting, then the Silver Hand would too. And I just couldn't bring myself to accept that. The idea of it was nice, and that definitely would have been the ideal outcome, but it simply wasn't reality. Kodlak's dying wish was to cure himself of lycanthropy and ensure that he passes on to Sovngarde upon death. Those who die with the beast still inside of them, he told us, become trapped inside of Hircine's realm and are forced to hunt for all of eternity. Because I believe in everyone's right to determine their own fate, I was happy to help Kodlak when he asked us to venture to Glenmoral Coven and retrieve a witch head, which he believed could be used to cure himself once and for all. But right when we returned to Jorrviskr, we learned that the Silver Hand attacked while we were gone and killed Kodlak. We were so close to fulfilling his dying wish, but we were too late. This was the event in the Companion's quest line that really created something of a moral dilemma inside of my mind. First and foremost, I felt horrible for Kodlak. He was dragged into a war that he didn't want anything to do with, a war he even warned would lead to an endless cycle of violence. Now, because of our anger towards the Silver Hand and our thirst for revenge, Kodlak was stuck with Hircine in the afterlife, something that he feared above all else. It begs the question, are we to blame for Kodlak's death? If we hadn't launched attacks on Gallows Rock and Treva's Watch, would Kodlak still be alive? It's certainly possible, but I argue that these questions are ultimately irrelevant. Want to know why? Because there was never a choice to begin with. The way I see it, the war against the Silver Hand was the best chance we had to keep the companions alive. To prove this point, let's briefly explore the alternative. What would have happened if we stopped fighting the Silver Hand? What if we took a more peaceful approach and tried to come to some kind of an understanding? I argue that nothing would have changed. The Silver Hand would have still been just as dedicated to the extermination of werewolves as they were before, and the violence would have continued. Remember, this is a deeply held belief that the Silver Hand holds. It's part of who they are. Sadly, I don't think anything would have changed that. Once you accept this unfortunate truth, it becomes obvious what needs to be done. One way or another, the threat needs to be eliminated. The companions only ever had two options: kill or be killed, hunt or be hunted. As far as the death of Kodlak and Skjor, it pains me to say that this is just a consequence of war. Anytime you're staring evil in the face, evil will always have a victory or two. Peace is rarely obtained for free. There is almost always a price to be paid or a sacrifice to be made. And in the case of the companions, the lives of Kodlak and Skjor was the price. Make no mistake, I'm not trying to minimize these tragic losses. Both Skjor and Kodlak were honorable, decent men who did not deserve to die. Thankfully, we can rest easy knowing that justice has been served. I realized that this was a bit different and shorter than the types of videos I typically post on my channel, but I felt the need to dedicate an episode to analyzing the relationship between the companions and the Silver Hand from a moral perspective. As I've said dozens of times in the past, Bethesda does an incredible job at storytelling, and many of their quests are riddled with ethical dilemmas that make the player think about the game from a number of different perspectives. In my opinion, the Companion's questline is a perfect example of Bethesda's masterful and thought-provoking storytelling. I would love to know your thoughts on this, folks. Do you agree with me when I say that the Silver Hand would have continued killing werewolves, regardless of how the Companions approached the conflict? Do you think we are to blame for the death of Skjor and Kodlak? And if so, what could the companions have done differently? Let me know in the comments below. I post new videos on Skyrim every single Thursday and Friday, folks, so be sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all of my latest content. If you're an entertainment junkie like I am, then you might like my brand new podcast, Pass the Veal, where we discuss everything from upcoming video games to movies and television shows. I post video versions of the podcast right here on my YouTube channel every Sunday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to check that out as well. But that's all for now, folks. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.